Hello and welcome. My name is Red Boot, and this is a Let's Play of Panzer Campaigns 1943, which is designed by John Tiller, and published and distributed by John Tiller Software and HPS Simulations. Let me get one thing off my chest right off the bat. This is my very first Let's Play. It's actually the first video that I will ever upload onto YouTube, so I'm very excited about that. A little apprehensive. I'm learning the ropes a little bit in terms of the technology and what I need to have in place in order to make it a good resolution for you all and a good recording for you all, and reasonably high level of production value. And bear with me if I don't get that perfect the first time. If I get feedback one way or the other, I will try to make improvements. The other thing I wanted to deal with was precisely why I have chosen this game to feature on my first Let's Play. I play a lot of computer games, I play a lot of strategy and grand strategy games. I love the Paradox titles. Europa Universalis 4 is one of my favorites, Crusader Kings 2. I started playing Hearts of Iron 4 when it was published a couple months ago. I love Distant Worlds Universe, Civilization 5, and a bunch of others. I download all my games, or pretty much all my games, on Steam. And this is an exception, of course. It's not available on Steam. But I decided to do this largely because, first of all, I've played it for quite a while, and I love the John Tiller games. I think they're brilliant. And I think it's a little bit underrepresented on YouTube. There really just aren't that many Let's Plays out there of this particular line of games. There's one YouTuber I'm aware of that's done a couple, and I've seen a couple of snippets here and there, and a couple in non-English languages. And I really just wanted to do one. I've asked a couple of YouTubers who are interested in war games and historical games if they were interested in doing this, and the feedback I've gotten from them is mostly that this game is too complex. They don't want to go through the learning curve, and I'll admit that there is a little bit of a learning curve, but I don't find this game um, too complex compared to, say, Europa Universalis 4 or Hearts of Iron 4, which frankly find more complex. I think this game is very playable without delving into the depths of how the game engine works and how the calculations work. You can certainly do that. A lot of that documentation is available up in the help menu here. And uh, but I don't think it's really necessary. And you'll find as we run through this game that while I've played it for a long time, I don't consider myself a great expert on the game mechanics. There are some things I don't know. I'll do my best to explain what I can as we go through, and hopefully make a good go of it. But I don't think it's really necessary to delve into all those things. So I think this is a great uh, war game to get into for people who are into levels of complexity and like historical war games, but don't want to go crazy with some of the other titles. So that being said, let's launch into this. I've chosen Kursk 43, uh, which is not one of the newer titles. There's, I think, 19 different Panzer campaigns titles, which pretty much covers the entirety of World War II now. I think pretty much every major theater of World War II. And I've chosen Curse 43 not because it's one of the newer titles, but because I think it's one of the better titles. I think there's some good scenarios in here, and B, I think Kursk is one of the better known battles. It's very exciting. There were a lot of tanks introduced in this battle, and some very interesting sort of strategic notions. Although this game is going to be primarily tactical, so I thought it would be an interesting start. So anyway, this is the first screen that you get into when you enter into any of these games. It enables you to choose the scenario that you want. You see here that you can choose anything from the full battle, which is 121 turns. I think there's one in here that's even a little bit larger than that. Or the northern attack, the southern attack, and this is a pincer movement, the Battle of Kursk. Um, and you could choose either one of those, and I'm scrolling down here quite a few others. Now I'm going to choose something a little bit on the short end to sort of demonstrate the game, and because I don't want to go too far in terms of length. So I'm going to choose this Cherkasskoye scenario, which is 9 turns. It's called a gaping hole. I'm going to choose the alt scenario. This may not be available on your vanilla if you download this game from John Tiller or HPS. I think you've got to go to Volcano Mod. So it's a mod. There's a guy named Volcano Man. I think his name is Ed Williams, who's rebalanced a lot of these scenarios so that they're a little bit more fair. and I usually choose those, and I'm gonna choose that. I don't think there's major revisions to the order of battle or to the setup of the pieces. I think it's more uh, the value of victory conditions and so forth that are necessary in order to win the game and so forth. So I'm going to choose the alt scenario. Click OK. This screen allows you to choose which side you want to play. I'm going to choose the Axis side, which is the attacking side. For the Russian side, I'll choose automatic with fog of war on. I can also set an advantage, a buff to either side. I'm not going to do that. There are rules that you can put into effect. I'm not going to go through all of these, but they're basically various uh, rule sets that you can put into play depending on what you want to do. I usually leave it up to the game designer to decide what's best and just go with the default, unless there's something that's particularly important to me. So we'll go OK. And this is the initial map. Air units are available. We'll get into that in a second. 2 out of 9 HQs are out of command. We'll get into that in a second. I'll click out of that. Now, there are a number of ways that you can view this. Obviously, this one is not very playable, at least on this this resolution. But there's a better zoom in of the two-dimensional battlefield, and then you can also play a zoom out version of the three-dimensional battlefield, and finally a zoom in version of the three-dimensional battlefield, which is probably the largest resolution. And this is kind of nice. I used to play on this a fair amount. It's each counter, first of all, is depicted as a counter, as in a classical war game, with elevation effects here that are readily visible. Very nice artwork. There's also information available on each hex, same information that's available up here at the top. But I've gotten used to playing in the two-dimensional, so that's what I'm going to do. Hopefully that won't be a disappointment to too many of you. You've got to sort of know what these unit counters are. Mechanized infantry, infantry. Uh, these are anti-tank tanks. Forgive me, I can't remember the term off the top of my head. And tanks here, treaded tanks, and so forth. And you'll learn these as we get through. If you haven't before, it's not a big deal. There are pictures up here of each unit as you click on them, so it's not something that you need particularly to memorize. So let's talk a little bit about what the victory conditions are in this game. You can see these ovals with numerals. These are victory hexes that you need to take over. The Germans, which are the blue, need to take over in order to win the game. There are 750, 850, 1100 points available down here, and there's 1,000 pointer available up here. You'll see if you go to Info Victory that in order to win the game, to get a minor victory, the Germans need to score 1,000 points. In order to get a draw, they need to score 800 points. In order to avoid a major defeat, to get a minor defeat, they need to score 600 points. A major victory is 1,500 points. So to win the game, to do better than a draw, you need 1,000 points. This is 1,100, but you also get points for destroying units. And in this particular scenario, the Germans really have to slog through a lot of minefields. That's what these counters are. And the Russians are entrenched in bunkers and pillboxes. This is the only Russian unit that we can see right now, but it's a good example. It's in a bunker, and it gets a -40 modifier to any attack against it. So very difficult to sort of flush out. And I think all of the Soviet units in this area are pretty much in either bunkers or pillboxes. What I don't know, because I haven't gone through this scenario except for a couple of turns just to sort of get my bearings straight, is how far back these entrenchments go. So I don't know, for example, how easy or difficult it is going to be to get to this 1,000. In 9 turns, that seems like it's going to be quite difficult, if not impossible. So I'm assuming that in order to win, we need to take over these 4 objectives and not get too beat up to get the 1,000 points that we need. You'll see that the Germans have 4 divisions available in this scenario. There are no reinforcements. You could check that by going up to, I believe, units. Yeah, units scheduled, and if there were reinforcements, there would be set up in here, but there are none. So there are no reinforcements in this game for the Germans. We have four divisions available to us. This is the um, 3rd Panzer Division, currently out of command, which affects its ability to supply its troops. And the 3rd is a pretty powerful division with mechanized troops and morale B, 90 Panzer IIIs, which are reasonably good tanks, but not great bunker busters. You can tell by the hard attack value of 15. When we get to some of the other tanks a little bit later, you'll see that much higher attack values for hard, which is what you want to look at for infantry in bunkers and pillboxes. Infantry is normally a soft attack, a soft target, but it is a hard target when it is in fortified positions. So that's the 3rd. There's some artillery back here. Range of anywhere from 11, 13, and 11 hexes. So that's within plenty of range to get to the Soviet units, which are probably going to be behind these minefields. The next division over is the famous SS division, the Großdeutschland division. That's what this GD means. This is a much more powerful division. It's got mechanized units, morale A, very difficult to break. Also, flamethrower tanks. Attached to this are Panthers, which I believe were introduced by Hitler in the Battle of Kursk, if I'm not mistaken. But look at these attack values in the 50s for hard. So these are going to be very important bunker busting units going in early. The next division over is the 11th. Unfortunately, it's very close to the same color as the 3rd, but it is a different division. This is a slightly more rosy color. And it's basically the same as the 3rd division. I think the tanks are, yeah, they're also Panzer IIIs. There's about 100 of them, so they won't, again, be particularly useful in bunker busting, but might be useful as they break out into some of these areas in here. My hope is that we can score a lot of points with these tanks in terms of killing units, so that we can sort of catch up as we're probably going to lose some units in these minefields going forward early on. And the last division is an infantry division, the 167th. I'm clicking on the headquarters unit to find out what it is, which is all infantry, but there are some tanks, Stugs, I believe, Stug 3s, good bunker busting units that are attached to this unit, and it looks like there's 10 here, 10 here, and 10 here, with some cavalry, which in this case is a motorcycle unit. So now the one thing I've noticed about this scenario is that the engineers, there's a couple of things from an entrenchment standpoint that we need to keep in mind in playing this scenario. One is that there are very significant minefields. You see these 3s. These are the most important minefields in the game. Minefields can either be level 1, level 2, or level 3. In fact, there's some smaller level 1 ones down here that will probably just skirt around. But the level 3 ones we can't skirt around because they're right in the way of where we need to go. And they'll destroy a lot of units as you move through them. So one strategy you can use is to bring your engineers up, and the engineers actually can get rid of these minefields. Takes 3 turns because they can only reduce it by 1 level per turn. And then you don't take any damage going through. They can also remove these obstacles, which look like razor wire. And that can be very useful. Unfortunately, the engineers in this game, as you can see, are a little bit far back. The 167th Infantry's is back here. The 11th Panzer Divisions is back here. I'm not sure where the Großdeutschlands are. They're back here. And so I don't think we have the luxury of being able to wait for the engineers to come up and clear out the minefields, because it's going to take, it's going to take 2 or 3 turns just to get up to the minefields, and then it's going to take 2 or 3 turns to reduce the minefields, and we only have 9 turns in this scenario. So I don't think we're going to have to move forward onto the minefields and take our medicine. The other thing that is worth noting is these brown lines are anti-tank ditches, and tanks can't go over them. And having played through the first couple of turns of this scenario, while you can't really see them very well on the graphics, there are anti-tank ditches all over the place, and it's virtually impossible for tanks to get through into this open area. Now, engineers can also blow up anti-tank ditches, and infantry, mechanized infantry, can't go over anti-tank ditches in their trucks, but they can go on foot and go over the anti-tank ditches, which we may end up having to do. But in order to get the tanks over, the engineers are going to have to come up and blow those anti-tank ditches. So um, we may not get more than a couple turns of tank support as we move up into this area here. We'll have to kind of see how that goes. So that's the other thing that I wanted to point out. So I don't know. With that, let's get into the game. What I'm going to try to do in most of these turns is sort of move across the board one division at a time. And I'll sort of show you some of the resources that are available. This is not a tutorial, as probably should be evident already at this point. I'm not going to get into all the details of this game. If this is something that people want me to do a little bit later, I'd be happy to get into a little bit more detail about how the game works. But for the most part, I'll try to explain what I'm doing a little bit, but play the game primarily as we move through. So I think what I'm going to do is, obviously the center here is important. Uh, it's not as important to break through on the flanks in this particular scenario, but I think in general, I'll want the 167th to try to take this 250 hex. I'll want the 3rd to take this 250 hex, and I'll want the Grossdeutschland and 11th to take the 500 hex and the 100 hex. That's sort of the general idea. So let's start with the 3rd Division over here. Let's move these guys up into the fracas. You'll notice I have the sound turned off, by the way. When I tried recording this before, the booming sounds of opportunity fire and artillery and so forth were so loud that they overrode my voice, and so I've turned this onto a silent mode. Whoops. All right, we'll bring this. I'm a little bit leery about bringing up this anti-tank unit. There's only 10 guns. Probably they're going to get decimated on the minefields, but I'm going to give it a try and just see, because they have some decent bunker busting capabilities. I might not do this with all the anti-tank units that I have, but maybe just these ones. And now the tanks. These are a little bit too big from a stacking standpoint, so I'm going to break these down into 2 smaller units of 50 each. I'm also going to break down the engineering units into 3 separate units to make it a little bit easier to move them onto the minefields and so forth, and get done the work that they need to get done. All right, so the tanks will move up. To these more advanced positions. And the engineers, I believe, are going to have to just move up the 1 hex. I don't think they're going to move up that far. These guys will move up. Move the HQ up a little bit so it stays in touch with its troops. These faster recon units, we probably won't move up until a little bit later, but we'll go ahead and move them up 1 hex. Let's attempt an artillery strike on one of these 2. We'll take the bunker at -40. A little bit more vulnerable than the pillbox. Hopefully we'll get a lucky disruption, but we don't. Okay, on to the Grossdeutschland. Move these guys up. Again, not waiting to move up the engineers because we're going to need to sort of take our medicine a little bit here on the minefields because we just don't have the time to bring up the engineers. We do have some artillery. We have some martyrs here, Martyr 2s. Good bunker busting capabilities. We'll move them up. I've got an artillery unit here. I'm going to attempt to fire on this forward unit. No effect, except for a couple of guys down. Okay, again, these engineers I'm going to break down into smaller units. Oops. And begin to move them up. Move them into the minefield. Why not? Clear mines. Their primary job, though, is going to be to take down the anti-tank ditches when we get up that way. Okay. These flame-throwing units are terrible at hard and soft attack, but they're excellent at assault. So they'll be good at assaulting these bunkers once we disrupt units. So I'm going to go ahead and move them up to just behind the front lines. These Panther units, I'm going to break them down into 2 units of 48 apiece for the same reason I did it earlier. They're just too big to be lumbering around in stacks of 96. This will make them a little bit easier to manage. And we can still concentrate them as we wish. See if we can get one more hex. We can. We lost 3 vehicles and we were disrupted. Hopefully they're going to... And we lost 1 vehicle. So they're fairly advanced. Okay, 2 Morale A units. We'll move up to here. These are more of the recon units, so we'll move them a little bit behind the enemy lines. Here's 96 Panthers. Once again, we're going to break these down into 2 smaller units and move them up. And mistakenly moved them through a minefield. That wasn't too bright. That's as far as they're going to go. The Nebelwerfers don't have very long range. These are rocket artillery. They have excellent capabilities against soft targets. We'll move them right in behind enemy lines. This HQ unit will move up to maintain contact with its troops. More tanks here. It exceeds stacking limitation. Alright, we'll move these guys back. More important that we get the tanks up. Okay. Move the recon units back. No, we can't do that. Alright, we'll move the HQ division up the road a little ways. Here's some artillery units. And we'll see if we can get a lucky attack in. No good there. No good there. Two more mechanized infantry units down here. Get them moved up. More artillery here. Again, trying to get some lucky shots. They don't have very good hard attack values against units in these bunkers, but once in a while you get a disruption that can be very helpful. All right, that's the Grossdeutschland. Won't move up the anti-aircraft units at this point. Let's go with the 11th Division. And again, move these guys onto the minefields. Move these recon units in behind. So not right onto the minefields. These martyrs will move up. All right, the engineers, once again, we will break down into smaller units and move them up. Can't move them up onto that obstacle. Don't really need to clear that obstacle. There's plenty of room to go around, but and here's a mechanized unit. We'll move over to here. Again, some artillery. So maybe we'll get a lucky break against one of these entrenched units, but we do not. Okay, the tanks will obviously move up as far as they can go because I want to have their bunker busting capabilities on the next turn to fire at this pillbox. Flamethrower is not as important yet, but I'd like to get them up there, and we take a one vehicle hit. All right, now the 167th. With the 167th, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move up the infantry. I'm going to move the Stugs around the flank up into here, into these open areas, and try to concentrate them. So we'll just start by moving up the infantry only onto these minefields. And the Stugs will come around. Whoops, as best they can. I think that's as far as he's going to go. No, he can go to the next one. And the next one. This guy is going to have to go through some woodsy areas, so he's only going to be able to move 2 hexes, it looks like. That's it. All right, the engineering unit will break down. And begin to move up to clear out some of these minefields. I think I'll leave this motorcycle unit here now. Move up the headquarters 1 hex. Let's fire up here with the artillery. See if we can get a lucky break, which we do not. Now I'm going to press the E key to see if we have any other artillery in the game that we've forgotten, and we do. We forgot 1 unit here, so I'm going to use him to fire here. And I'll press the A key to see if we have any air assets. And it looks like we do have a couple of Stukas, so that is good. 16, 18, that's the hard attack value and soft attack value. 32, 6, the same. 32 obviously is an excellent bunker buster. So I'm going to attempt to use the 32 against this unit here. And it was intercepted by enemy air units. So I will try the 16 against this unit. And he was intercepted as well, so that's a little bit of bad luck. And I think that's the end of the turn, and probably an appropriate place to cut the video. When we come back, we'll do the AI turn and continue on with the second turn.